The Forum at 8 with Xolani Gwala.
It is now 6 minutes after 8. Very good morning indeed, and a warm welcome to the Forum at 8 here on Safm, South Africa's news and information leader. Already we have a couple of emails about our subject on the Forum at 8 this morning, talking about issues of land restitution process in this country and how far it has gone. Right then, there's a report titled Paying for the Past, Addressing Past Property Violations in South Africa, a report that was put together by Professor Bernadette Atu-Ahene, of Law and Public Affairs Fellow at Princeton University. This report argues that as a key player in South Africa, this is the land restitution process, in South Africa's reconciliation process, the Commission should have ensured that financial awards had a long-term economic impact so that it could address the ingredient that has been missing in the reconciliation process of this country. We will talk a little bit about this report then and where it is placed in the broader land reform program in this country, but also take your thoughts on email at gwalax@sabc.co.za, gwalax@sabc.co.za. Also, SMS is at 34701, 34701. In fact, as I mentioned, there's one email that has come through from Opa Tsasanyane in Sebokeng, who says, I've lost hope and trust in the whole land restitution process of this country. There's a small case at Land Claims Court, Velde Fontaine Trust, that covers the entire Val Triangle and some parts of Soweto and West Rand. This case is full of dirty tricks and buck passing with no ending. That's Opa Tsasanyane in Sebokeng. We'll look at these things then in a minute. But let me introduce my guest on the program. I'll start here with me in the studio. Professor Bernadette Atu-Ahene, Law and Public Affairs Fellow at Princeton University, here with me in studio. Very good morning to you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you for this invitation.
Thanks indeed for coming through this morning. Let me also welcome on our lines Professor Cheryl Walker, Professor of Sociology. She has extensive done research as well in the area of land reform, rural development and gender studies. Very good morning to you, Professor Walker.
Good morning.
And thank you very much for your time. Also on the line, David Neves, researcher, Institute for Property, Land, Agrarian Studies Plus. David, good morning.
Good morning, Xolani. Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks indeed for coming through, David. Much appreciated. Right. Professor Atu-Ahene wrote this report. If you can just take us briefly around some of the findings, because you did research here, you spoke to families involved. Firstly, what were you looking for and what did you find?
Right. So I worked closely with the Land Restitution Commission. I did over 150 interviews of people who received some kind of compensation through the Land Restitution Commission. And the report you have before you is about those 80 of the 150 that chose financial compensation. Mm-hmm. And the question the report answers is how did the people spend the money? Mm-hmm. And what I found, the kind of significant finding of the report was that 30% of the people spent the money in such a way that increased their net economic assets. Most of those people spent the money on improving their home, which increased the value of their primary asset. 32% of the people spent the money such that it had a moderate economic impact, and 38% of the people spent the money such that it had a low economic impact. And the significance of this in terms of policy is that in around 2005, 2006, the Commission began de-emphasizing the financial compensation option in a really problematic way. So they would go to a community and give all the options. I have quotes from Linda Faleni, who was the regional land claims commissioner for the Eastern Cape, saying that, they go very thoroughly through development, and when they got to financial compensation, they would hurry through it, right, to encourage people not to take financial compensation. The only problem, which is good because when you get land, you get more, but the only problem with that is the Commission has a monopoly on information. So when you don't give people information, you're basically removing that option. And so one of my policy recommendations is that instead of removing options, is to give people more options. What I mean by that, give them the option of getting their land back if the land is available, alternative land, financial compensation, and a fourth option of vouchers, meaning that how people were paid were through something called the standard settlement offer, which ranged anywhere from 17,000 Rand to 60,000 Rand. So the Commission could say, okay, you're entitled to 40,000 Rand in cash. I'll give you perhaps 60,000 instead if you take a voucher to Cash Build or some other, if the Commission is trying to encourage people to improve their homes. Another example would be instead of 40,000 Rand, we'll give you 60,000 Rand if the Commission makes a direct deposit into a qualifying education educational or training institute. So the point is figuring out how to make the financial compensation option more effective instead of taking it away. Because the fact of the matter is that 70% of claimants, both urban and rural, were paid through financial compensation. That's the fact.
Sure.
So we need to deal with the fact and figure out how to make that more effective.
Let me go back, though. Part of the problem here in South Africa is that we've got to deal with the skewed patterns of ownership, and financial compensation doesn't deal with that issue.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I really think, because that is one of the things that has been bedeviling South Africa's democracy since its inception, is this kind of, 87-13 number. 87% of the land was owned by white, who constituted less than 10% of the population. And as of 2008, less than 10% of that, land has changed from black hands to white hands. But my contention is this: the appropriate place let me start. Land reform is a three-pronged process. It's land restitution, redistribution, and tenure reform. And my contention is that the appropriate place to address this fundamental inequality is in land redistribution. Why? Well, the point is we should be giving the land to people, the farm workers who are already on the land, know the land, have been tilling the land. Just because who will use the land more effectively? The person who's already on the land, or the person whose grandfather 2 generations ago owned the land? You understand? Restitution is about restoring legal rights. And those aren't the people who will necessarily use the land more productively, have the skill sets, the desire, etc. So my contention is, again, where we need to really deal with this fundamental inequality is in the redistribution prong of land reform, and not necessarily in restitution, because those people who used to be on the land, their grandfathers used to be on the land, aren't necessarily the ones who will use the land most effectively today.
But it is a very sensitive issue, especially because of food security, for instance. Food security, people would like to get some land so that they can grow their own crops. So you've got to emphasize land as well I suppose maybe equally with the financial award.
I agree. And again, what my recommendation is not to say that we need to have more people choosing financial compensation. Don't understand me to say that. What I'm saying is the fact of the matter is 70% of people, both urban and rural claimants, are being given financial compensation. So my intervention is merely to say, if that's what's happening on the ground, let's find a way to make it more effective. Because in my opinion, the thing that has been woefully missing in terms of this whole South Africa's reconciliation process is economic empowerment. There's been a whole lot of forgiveness and very little economic empowerment.
The
and
issue,
we have an opportunity to do that.
And I think some people may raise this issue a little later on about the amounts that are given here, because some may very well say that you say I must choose financial, that it must be there on the table. But the reality is that it's not even a lot of money.
I agree. And so there were 2 ways that financial compensation was decided. It was something called historic valuation and something called the standard settlement offer, which I mentioned earlier. Historic valuation is actually tied to the market value of the land, and you bring it up through the CPI, but that was given mostly to rural claimants. So that, historic valuation, but the majority of claimants got paid through something, again, called the standard settlement offer, which did not have a direct connection to the market value of the land loss. It was the settlement offer, standard settlement offer was linked to the housing subsidy and increased as the housing subsidy increased. But yes, the amounts were very low, and that's one of the recommendations in the report, is to actually increase the amount of compensation that's being given to people through these SSOs.
Let's bring in my other guests here. Perhaps starting with you, Professor Walker. What are your thoughts here? Because the issue is whether or not we should continue giving people financial award, or should we say, listen, the emphasis must be on resettlement?
Thank you very much. Well, I think the report we have before us is really interesting, and I think a lot of what's being said there makes sense to me. And I think what it's also showing is the enormous complexity and variability of the issues, because we're looking at both rural and urban, and within the rural we're looking at a huge range of different regions, different environmental farming potential, etc. So I think that the option of financial compensation does make sense, particularly perhaps in the urban context. But in the rural areas as well, I think it's important to differentiate between people who really want to farm and have the capacity to farm, the potential to farm, or already the capacity, and people who actually don't, who are already living in a semi-urban context. And in that case, I think actually the kind of options that are being laid out and making the financial compensation a more sophisticated set of options really does make sense.